Hey guys, welcome to the video, and today I'm going to be showing you guys how to build a two-dimensional drawing website. Uh, as you can see, we can draw here. It's running a little slow. Change the size, draw a little bit bigger, change the color, and erase. All right, so let's go ahead and get into how to code this. So here we are in the app that we just created. I'm going to shut this down really quick and start up another. To do that, it's simply npx create React app. I don't believe I mentioned it, but this was created using React. And we're going to call this drawing. All right, guys, and it is done being created. So I'm going to go ahead and CD the previous directory I was in. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we are going to go ahead and add a components folder here simply because I like it for organizational purposes. And we're going to move into app.js. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and remove all of the default, including the CSS, the imports. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to import state and use effect. There we go. All right. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and make a couple variables. So now's a good time to mention, all these drawing platforms are, I assume, are a bunch of little pixels that are mapped to certain places, and it just keeps a some kind of store of the coordinates of these. So what we need to do is we need to create an object that'll store the coordinates for us. And I'm going to call an individual drawing item a blotch. So let's go ahead and create a blotch object. And because it'll store multiple, we will call it blotch objects. There we go. And for now, we'll set this to an empty array. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add some event listeners, and these are going to help us determine when our mouse is moving, when our mouse is down, and when our mouse is up. So for that, we go document.add event listener, and it's mouse up. And we're going to add in a function here. We haven't actually defined this yet, but we will in a minute. There we go. And we're going to copy this and do this 3 more times. Second event listener is mouse down. And the third will be mouse move. Simple enough. So now that we have that, we will go ahead and we will start defining these functions. It would be very nice if I had the extensions that make these functions faster to create. So for handle mouse down, what we're going to do is we're going to say, first I should mention, we should import the event. And we're going to say if event.button is equal to 0, then what we want to do is we want to create a state, first of all, that will hold our mouse down event. And we're going to set this to false. There we go. And here we're going to want to set that to true. There we go. And we're going to go ahead and just copy this and paste it. Go. All right. And we actually don't need the additional code there. There we go. And one more to go. And I believe, yeah, So the last one we're actually going to wait to use. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and add a use effect here. And this use effect will give it a dependency array of mouse down. That way it updates every time mouse down changes. And what we're going to do here is we are going to add the functionality for when the mouse is actually down. So the first thing is we only really want to map out coordinates whenever the mouse is down. So we're going to go with if mouse is down, then we will do something. And for now, we'll leave it at that. We're going to move into a return event within the use effect. And what we're going to return is a function. And that function is going to remove the event listeners because you don't want to keep in mind, we're going to be re-rendering the site close to about 100 times per second. So we do not want to be adding 300 event listeners per second. So what we want to do is we want to remove these event listeners every time this is re-rendered. So event listener, and we're going to remove all of the event listeners that we created. There we go. All right, so this is where we can start mapping out our coordinates for the blotch objects that we have a store of where we want to paint. So we're going to say if our mouse is down, then we want to set the blotch object. And what we're going to do here is we're going to create a function. We're going to create a function previous data, and previous data is going to return. Oops, excuse me here. Never mind, we actually don't need that. What it's going to return is it's going to return an array, and that array will be the previous data. So what was already stored in the blotch objects, because we don't want to rewrite the things that we've already wrote. And it's going to contain an object, because this is an array of objects, mind you. And what that's going to be is, first, let's import event here. It's going to be event.client x. And we'll map that to our x coordinate. And then we'll do the same with y. There we go. And I think that looks good. All right, so there's a few things that I want to touch up here. This should be within the use effect. There we go. Prettier is not doing very well right now. There we go. Okay. So this right here, we're actually going to be calling this whenever a certain function is called. So remove the event parameter within use effect, and we're going to use the handle. We're going to actually define the handle mouse move function here. And that's where we're going to pass in our event parameter. And then we're going to move our set blotch objects line into here. There we go. And I believe that should be enough for us to start mapping out coordinates. So I'm going to put a div tag here just for the time being. And I'm going to console log out the blotch objects. And we're going to put this within JSON.stringify simply so that we're not looking at a log that simply says an array of objects, which gets annoying. All right, so let's go ahead and move back to our project. Actually, before we do that, I have to use npm run start. Oops, got a CD. There we go. It's running. So let's check and see if we're getting our coordinates mapped. Remove event listener. Two arguments required, one only present. So we have to add functions to the event listeners. There we go. And hopefully that solves some things. So let's go back to the project, refresh, and see what we get. Beautiful. As you guys can see, a bunch of coordinates get mapped incredibly fast. Wish it would map that many when I'm trying to draw. Not exactly sure why it doesn't. All right, so now that we have our coordinates, what we can do is we're going to go ahead and go into our components folder, and we are going to add a file, and we're going to call this canvas. And the reason that we're going to create a separate canvas is because if you were to add anything else to this project, like a sidebar, for example, then you don't want to draw on that sidebar. So we want to make it to where we can only draw on this canvas object. So let's go ahead and create const canvas equals, there we go. And we're going to go ahead and export this as well. And let's see. I think the first thing we're going to do here is we are simply going to go ahead and render this within app.js. And obviously we need to import that as well. And I did not name this properly. If you guys were following along, you might want to rename Canvas. And we're going to go into app.js. There we go. And the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to simply pass this blotch object as a prop. There we go. And now that that's passed, we're actually going to create another component. We're going to call that blotch. And remember, this blotch is a single individual drawing component. So it will be what we actually visually see. And once we're done here, we're going to go ahead and we're going to pass blotch object from canvas down to blotch. So let's go ahead and receive that blotch object here. And let's now go ahead and return the blotch object or the blotch component. All right, so we have to import this. Great. So let's receive this object. Now, notice I'm going to call it blotch object, not plural, as we've been using. See, and the reason for that is because since the blotch is a single individual item out of the coordinates, we're going to only pass a single blotch object out of the array. So to do that, we are going to map this out, and we're going to pass blotch object singular, and that is where we will return our blotch component. Excuse me there. Yep. So it's probably going to start being difficult. So I'm going to put this within some div tags. Beautiful. And this is where we'll pass the individual blotch object. All right, so now we are going to go within blotch and we will return a just the letter H, and that'll let us know that this is actually being created when there are coordinates. So let's try this out, see how this goes. And looks like it's worked pretty well. There's plenty of H's going down the screen, and each one of those represents where we would have been painting. So now that that's there, let's go back and let's keep coding. So the first thing we're going to do here is I think we should actually be able to see where our blotch objects should be, and let's make them a color. So we're going to add a style variable, and we're going to set the background to red. We're going to set the width to 10 pixels. And we will set the height to 10 pixels. Keep in mind, this is all CSS that we're writing currently. And we're going to set the border radius to 100% so that we have a circle. We don't want to be drawing in squares. Which I do suppose there are actually drawing utensils that are actually squares, so I guess it wouldn't be all that crazy. And this div, we are simply going to add a style tag to it, and we're going to call it style. Now let me make sure that looks right. I don't see any reason why that wouldn't work. So let's remove the H from within here, and let's go back to our app and make sure. Now those look awfully like squares. Yeah, those look awfully like squares, so I'm not exactly sure what happened there, but we'll just keep continuing anyhow. So now that we have that, what we're going to do is we're going to go back to Canvas, and in order for us to be able to put the objects on the screen where we want them, we are going to use the absolute, or forgive me, the style, the position, sorry. You're going to use the position thing with CSS, and we're going to set that to relative. And then we will include that in the style here. There we go. So now our canvas should be relative, and our blotch object, which is being rendered from the canvas div, will now have a position of absolute. And what that'll do is that will give us the ability to put our blotch objects directly where our coordinates are. So from here, we are going to go with top, and we're going to use a string literal. Forgive me if that's not correct. And we're going to pull our coordinates from the blotch object. So blotch object.x, and we're going to add a pixel at the end there. And we'll do the same for the left. This top should not be x, it should be y. Pixel. All right, so we'll give this a little run, see how it does. And look at that. So you guys can now draw, and these are still drawing in squares, which I'm not exactly sure why. It's because I put border radius, and now everything's in circles. So you guys could leave it at that, or you could extend this a little bit, and that's what we're going to do now. So now we're going to create another component within components, and we're going to call that sidebar.jsx. And we'll just go ahead and make an empty function for now. There we go. And I suppose we'll go ahead and we'll write a little bit of some JSX for this really quick. All we're going to do first is, we'll just write out the whole thing. So we're going to create a div, and this div will contain our sidebar. The next thing we're going to do is create another div, and that div will contain we're going to create a select here to select different colors. And we're going to set the options as we'll do black. And we'll do red, blue, green, white. There we go. So something interesting you guys might not know about this is that the options, you actually don't have to define a value. If you don't define a value, it seems to take the values that you specify here. So this would be black, red, blue, black, black. I actually found that by accident because I forgot to add the values. And we're going to actually call this last one erase, but because we obviously don't want to erase, we're going to use a workaround here. We're going to set the value to white, and that'll make it seem as if we're erasing it, which obviously you could go in and delete the coordinates that you created. And if you did that, then it would act the same. But I don't find that to be natural to a drawing platform or easy. So now that we have that created, we're going to create another div, and this div will hold our size slider. So we're going to go with an input, and its type is going to be range. We're going to set our minimum value to 1, maximum value to 100, and that should be all for that. So now we want to handle the functionality of this, and what we're going to do is we're going to create two functions, one to handle the size and one to handle the color. And what we're going to do is we're going to go back here onto our select, and we're going to say on change, we want to handle our color change. And we'll do the same down here for our input. So now that we have that, we're actually going to take a step back. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write this in the way that I first wrote this, just to show you there's actually a problem with doing it this way. So let's go ahead and define some variables to hold our state for our color. So we're going to say color set color equals use state, and we're going to set this to black as default, and we'll do the same for the size. And we'll set this as default to 10. So now that we have that, we can start writing the functionality for these, and we're going to say set size to event dot target dot value. Just keep in mind these tags they always create events. So we'll pull the event parameters from them, and we're going to go ahead and do the same for the color. Beautiful. All right, so that should set our color. And so here's the first problem with putting these within the sidebar component. Actually, go ahead and make a style variable. And what we're going to do is we're going to set the width of our sidebar to be 200 pixels. And we're going to go ahead and we are going to include that in our first div. So style equals style. And now we should have a sidebar. Before we do that, actually, let's add a border. right, and we'll set that to 1 pixel solid black. All right, so if we go back here, then we have nothing. Um, it's interesting. Oh, that's because we did not render this within our app component, so we have to do that first. And we'll import our sidebar from slash components slash sidebar, and that should do it. Looks like we forgot to import our React use state. Go. Let's try that. All right, so we can draw, and that's great, except that our sidebar is not rendered yet. One moment. All right, so another folly here. I forgot to actually render that in the app component. And these want to be enclosed within a fragment because you cannot have, let's say, two divs or two components directly next to each other without being wrapped within a parent. All right, so this does not look correct. What we need to do is we need to go back into sidebar and we need to add a height of 100 view height, and that should actually be the end of that. There we go. So I'm not actually going to be able to show you guys what goes wrong here yet. I mean, as you guys can see currently, it's painting well below the mouse, and you don't want that kind of behavior in a paint tool. So we're going to go back in the app, and this will actually show you guys what I'm talking about with the error, with the issue that we have. And we're going to just simply say display. We're going to set that to flex, and then we're going to turn these fragments into divs, and we're going to set the style to the style variable that we just created. And now we have our canvas directly next to our sidebar. And so as you guys can see, it's painting far right of our mouse pointer. And the reason for that is because, as you guys can see, the width of the sidebar is actually, our canvas has been translated for 200 pixels to the right, but our coordinates are, they're mapping relative to this canvas component here, if that makes sense. So what we need to do is we actually need to move our variables from sidebar over to the app component. And while we're here, we're going to add another variable, and we're going to call that const sidebar width. And we're going to set that to 200. Now that we have that, we're going to pass all of these down as props to the sidebar component. So fortunately, we're going to have to set all of these, including the set, what do you call them? All right, so that was a lot of parameters, but they are passed now. So we're going to go back into sidebar, and we're going to go ahead and start importing these. All right, I think that looks good. And one thing I did forget to mention is we should set the value here equal to the actual size that we have. So there we go. And we'll do the same up here. Now this I'm actually not exactly sure about. I think it might, we'll leave it as it is for now. So one of the first things we're going to do is we're actually going to change the styling here, the width, and we're going to set that to a string literal, or I believe that's what that's called. And we're going to set that to sidebar width. And then at the end, we're simply going to add a pixel prefix or postfix. And that should handle that part. So we've done all of that, but the issue still remains that we have our mouse offset from where we're actually drawing. So what we need to go do is we need to go back into our app.js, and where we're setting the variables, we're going to want to subtract the width of the sidebar. And that should fix the problem that we're having. There we go. See, we are now able to draw where our mouse pointer is at. So the next issue that we're facing here is, for one, I don't particularly care for the styling of this, and we're not even really able to do a whole lot with this. Actually, you know, let's take a step back. So we're not able to draw with the colors or the size that we want, and I don't really like that. So let's go to our blotch object here, and we're gonna do something cool. So actually, let's go to app, and let's go ahead and make some adjustments to our blotch objects here. So the first thing we're going to do is, within this object that we're adding, we're going to create another object, and this is going to be the object that stores our coordinates. And now outside of that object, we're also going to add a color, and we'll set that to color, and we'll add a size, and we'll set that to size. There we go. So we're going to move into our blotch object now, and what we're going to do is we're going to, first of all, change how our coordinates work. So we're going to first access the chords object within the blotch object, and to make sure chords, yep. And then we're going to change our styling here. So let's go with some template literals. Actually, I don't believe we need template literals here. We can simply go with blotch.color here, and this is where we'll use our template, our string literals. And these will be blotch object dot size, and we'll add pixel to the end of that. And then we're just going to copy that, and we'll duplicate that here for the height. There we go. And that's looking good. So let's see how that does. All right, so not sure what the issue was there, but as you guys can see, we're now able to change our color, and our size is not working. So I'll have to figure out what's wrong with that here in a minute. And see, it did draw white up here. It's not seeming to want to draw white otherwise. There it goes. So now that we have that, let me go ahead and figure out what's wrong with the size component there. All right, guys, so I'm back, and I'm not exactly sure what the issue was, but I just copied over some code from my other file, and this is working just fine. I'm not exactly sure what went wrong there, but we're now able to adjust our size. So let's go and see, does it actually paint in a different size? Oh, it does. So it's being a little difficult. Let's go ahead and paint in black. See, our size has changed. And now what we are going to do is, you guys might have noticed, we're able to paint over here, and not only that, but it's actually affecting the actions that we take over here, and we don't want that. So we're going to add some CSS to that to go ahead and fix that problem. So I think the simplest way to solve this problem is because our sidebar is simply 200 pixels from the left side is we're going to go into here and we're going to say if the um, event dot mouse x is less than sidebar width, which this actually should be flipped because we want this to be able to run. And what we're going to do here is we're going to basically take this exact same statement and we're simply going to flip uh, the value compare. So now we're saying that we want to do this if, here, let's just go ahead and read this. So if our mouse is down and our mouse pointer is past the width of the sidebar, the X value is, then we want to be able to set our blotch objects. If not, we want to do something else. So we're going to say const can draw and we're going to set can draw, and I think it's probably best if we go with a false for that to begin with. And we're going to set can draw to false under these circumstances. There we go. Beautiful. And we're now going to pass down the can draw to the sidebar. Let me make sure that's correct. Yes, we need to pass that to the sidebar. So can draw there we go. And we're going to go back into our selection bar. And we're going to add a, wrong one, sidebar. Here we go. And we're simply going to add a style to this right here. So our first style is going to be pointer events, and we're going to set that to none. And the next one is, let me check really quick, user select. Sorry, I actually just recently learned of this. I don't work with CSS often, which is actually why I did this project, was to improve my CSS abilities. So now that we have that, we shouldn't actually be able to do anything over here. Yep. We also can't draw, which is interesting. Wonder why that is. Should at least allow us to draw on one of the sides. For the time being, I'm just going to go ahead and ignore that. So we're going to pull the can draw parameter here, prop, I should say. And what we're going to do is we're going to create two separate files, and that will allow us to change our style based on whether or not we can draw. So if we can draw, then we're going to want a style that does not contain the CSS properties we just created. And if we can't, then we do want it to contain these. And I do believe that var is used for scoping outside of the blocks that they're defined in. Interesting little change up. I started programming in JavaScript back in, what was it, 2016, 2015. And we did not have var, let, and const back then, I believe. It might have just been var. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and figure out why we can't draw anymore. All right, so found the issue. This should not be mouse. This should be client. Simple error. And that should fix that. So let's go ahead and see how this does. And we actually cannot draw here, which is great. It's actually worked out very well. If you guys wanted to add some additional styling properties here, you could also add in a feather if you used box shadow and did a little bit of custom settings. I didn't really feel like going that far into this project, but there you guys have it. You guys should have a 2D paint tool with changeable settings. Hope you guys liked the video. Have a good day.